Listen carefully. This is not a loud message. It does not rush you. It does not beg for your attention. It waits because truth does not chase. If you are here, it is because something in your spirit already recognizes what recently happened around you. You didn't react. You didn't explain yourself. You didn't defend your name. And yet, someone who underestimated you, someone who mistook your silence for weakness, someone who felt comfortable mocking you in rooms you were no longer trying to enter, was exposed without you lifting a single finger. You watched it unfold with a strange stillness inside, not satisfaction, not revenge, but a quiet confirmation that what you felt all along was real. And now, the same people who once laughed are uncomfortable. They avoid your name. They hesitate. They choke on conversations that used to flow easily because your absence revealed what your presence once covered. If you've been feeling lonely lately, isolated, cut off, misunderstood, hear this clearly. That loneliness was not rejection. It was protection. Before we go any further, type "I am chosen" in the comments, like this video, subscribe to this channel, not out of habit, but alignment. Because what you are witnessing is not coincidence. It is divine order correcting arrogance. Now, let's dive deeper. What you experienced was a separation phase, a quiet withdrawal engineered not to punish you, but to expose others. When you stopped explaining, when you stopped performing, when you stopped trying to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you, the masks around you began to fall. Some people only feel powerful when you are present to absorb their projections. When you step back, their character has no one to hide behind. That is why things unraveled so quickly. That is why conversations turned awkward. That is why stories stopped adding up. You didn't need to speak, because truth carries weight without volume. Your silence was not passive, it was disciplined, it was spiritual maturity. It was you trusting that what is real does not need to argue. And here is what many do not understand. Divine justice rarely looks dramatic. It does not announce itself. It does not rush in with noise. It simply removes you from environments that would have required you to shrink, then allows others to reveal themselves without your energy stabilizing the situation. That is why you feel different now. Not proud, not bitter, just awake. You see people more clearly. You hear what is not being said. You sense hesitation where confidence once pretended to exist. This is the reward of restraint. This is the fruit of self-control. You were being trained to let outcomes speak louder than explanations, to let distance do what confrontation never could, to let time expose what arguments only prolong. If you are still feeling the ache of isolation, understand this. You were not removed because you were weak. You were removed because your presence was delaying truth. And now that truth has surfaced, there is no need for you to return to what already collapsed in your absence. Stay still, stay grounded, stay silent if you must. What is meant to rise with you will approach with respect. What was meant to fall has already begun. Point 1. Why God moved you into isolation. Chosen one, God did not isolate you to punish you. He isolated you to preserve what was developing inside you. Isolation is not abandonment when God is involved. It is containment, protection, and intentional separation. There are seasons where God must remove you from familiar spaces, not because you failed, but because your presence alone began to disrupt false confidence. You didn't have to argue. You didn't have to defend yourself. You didn't even have to speak. Your energy carried truth, and truth agitates insecurity without permission. It exposes masks without effort. It unsettles people who survive on illusion. So God moved you quietly, gently, almost invisibly. Not because you were weak, but because the work he was preparing to do inside you required privacy. When too many voices surround a calling, God's methods get questioned. People project motives onto you that were never there. They accuse you of manipulation, strategy, pride, or revenge, when in reality you were simply becoming aligned. Isolation removes the audience so God can operate without debate, without commentary, and without interference. While you were alone, something precise was happening. Your discernment sharpened. You began to see through words instead of being moved by them. Your tolerance for nonsense dropped, not because you became cold, but because clarity replaced confusion. You stopped craving approval. You stopped explaining yourself. You started hearing God more clearly because the noise was stripped away. And yes, during that time it felt heavy. It felt quiet in a way that made nights longer and thoughts louder. It felt lonely, like something was missing, like people forgot you. But that loneliness was not a grave. It was a womb. Wombs are dark. Wombs are silent. Wombs feel restrictive. Yet they are the only places where life can be formed without contamination. God was building your backbone, your spiritual spine, and your ability to stand without leaning on validation. He was teaching you how to sit with yourself without escaping, how to trust him without distractions, and how to recognize his voice without echoes. You were being preserved from premature exposure. Had you stayed visible, what was forming inside you would have been attacked, drained, or misunderstood. So God hid you, not to shrink you, but to mature you. And now, as you emerge, you'll realize the isolation was never about losing people. It was about gaining authority, clarity, and alignment that could only be forged in silence. Point 2. The cocky clown spirit that revealed itself. There is a specific spirit this message is addressing, and it is not subtle. It is loud, performative, and addicted to attention. It thrives on applause, dominance, and the illusion of superiority. This spirit does not carry real authority. It performs confidence to cover deep insecurity. It laughs too loudly, speaks too often, and mocks quietly when it believes no one is watching. It mistakes noise for power and visibility for influence, and, above all, it consistently misjudges silence. This spirit looked at you and assumed your calm was fear. It read your humility as submission and your distance as weakness. It interpreted your restraint as hesitation and your patience as passivity. What it failed to understand is that silence backed by God is never empty. It is not confusion. It is not indecision. It is restraint, and restraint is power under control. Power under control does not announce itself, does not explain itself, and does not rush to prove anything. That is why arrogance is terrified of it. Arrogance survives on reaction, comparison, and validation. When it cannot provoke you, it begins to unravel. That is why this spirit kept talking. It needed witnesses. It needed reassurance. It needed to feel superior, because superiority was the only thing holding it together. Every word it spoke was an attempt to bait you into responding, to pull you down to its level, and to force you into a performance that would justify its own behavior. But you stayed still. You stayed grounded. You stayed covered. And God allowed it to speak just long enough to expose itself. God did not interrupt the noise because the noise was the evidence. The boasting revealed the insecurity. The mockery revealed the fear. The constant talking revealed the absence of peace. While it was trying to dominate the room, heaven was watching the contrast. While it was performing strength, you were embodying authority. And authority does not need volume. Authority does not need validation. Authority waits. Authority discerns. Authority moves only when instructed. This is why the tables turn without announcement. This is why outcomes shift quietly. This is why those who rely on noise are always shocked by the results. They never see restraint as a strategy until it is too late. They never recognize silence as alignment until God speaks on your behalf. And when he does, there is nothing left for you to say. Point 3. Why you did not defend yourself. You didn't stay quiet because you lacked words. You stayed quiet because your spirit was instructed. There are seasons when silence is not weakness but obedience, when holding your tongue is not surrender but alignment. You felt the urge to explain yourself, to clarify, to defend your name, yet something deeper restrained you. That restraint was not fear, it was discernment. God told you to stand still because he was already handling what you could never fix with explanations. There are battles where speaking too soon interferes with divine timing, where self-defense delays divine justice. You were being protected from saying the wrong thing at the wrong moment, from stepping into a trap disguised as an opportunity to clear things up. When God defends you, he does not argue your case line by line or negotiate perceptions. He does something far more precise. He reveals truth through exposure. He allows people to reveal themselves fully without interruption. He gives pride enough rope to hang itself. He lets arrogance speak freely, uninterrupted and uncorrected, until it contradicts itself. You didn't need to expose them. They exposed themselves. You didn't need to gather evidence. Their own actions testified. That is why the embarrassment was public. That is why witnesses were present. That is why the exposure happened without your participation. God wanted it to be undeniable. If you had spoken, your motives would have been questioned, your tone would have been analyzed, your character would have been put on trial instead of their behavior. But because you stayed silent, heaven spoke instead. Your quiet created space for truth to surface without distortion. Your restraint allowed clarity to emerge without argument. And when the truth finally came out, it carried a weight your words never could have carried. Silence positioned you above the chaos while God handled the outcome beneath you. You were not overlooked, you were being elevated. You were not ignored, you were being preserved. What looked like delay was actually precision. What felt like injustice was the setup for undeniable revelation. God did not need your voice to defend you. He needed your trust. And because you trusted him enough to stay quiet, he spoke loudly on your behalf in a way no explanation ever could. Point 4. Why a whole group is now uncomfortable. Notice something important. It was never just one person who shifted when the exposure happened. It was a group, a system of quiet consent, an unspoken alliance built on convenience rather than truth. There were people who never spoke against you publicly, yet privately benefited from the distortion of your character. People who smiled to your face while allowing mockery to circulate unchecked. People who called themselves neutral, not realizing that silence in the presence of injustice is a form of agreement. When God exposes one loud voice, he also pulls back the curtain on every silent nod, every passive laugh, and every moment someone chose comfort over integrity. That is why the atmosphere has changed. That is why the room feels heavier now, as if something invisible has been removed and everyone can feel the absence. Conversations stop when your name comes up because the story they rehearsed no longer holds power. The version of you they relied on for their sense of superiority has collapsed. The energy shifts when you enter because your presence now reminds them of what they participated in, even if they never said a word. Understand this clearly. They were never reacting to you as a person. They were reacting to the truth you carry, the clarity you embody, and the mirror your existence placed in front of them. Your light exposed compromises they were hoping to keep hidden. Your consistency challenged the roles they assigned themselves without ever earning them. And now that the truth has been revealed, they don't know where to place themselves. They cannot return to ignorance, but they are not ready for accountability. So they hesitate. They watch. They grow quiet. This is not rejection. It is disorientation. The narrative they depended on has been dismantled, and without it, they are unsure how to relate to you or to each other. This is why God allows the exposure to ripple outward instead of stopping at one individual. It is not punishment, it is alignment. The room feels different because the agreement has been broken. The silence you sense is not peace, it is reckoning. And you do not need to explain yourself, defend yourself, or reclaim your name. The truth has already done that work for you. All you are required to do now is stand still, remain grounded, and let the shift complete itself. Point 5. Why loneliness always comes before vindication. Loneliness is not random, it always precedes clarity. God removes emotional noise, so discernment can sharpen, because constant voices dull spiritual perception. When you are alone, you stop absorbing other people's opinions, projections, and expectations, and something deeper activates. You begin hearing patterns instead of words. You recognize energy without explanation. You sense intention before behavior. That season trained you in ways comfort never could. It taught you who feels safe in your presence and who feels threatened by it, who respects your silence and who only valued your availability. Loneliness stripped away confusion and exposed truth. It wasn't designed to break your spirit or punish your heart. It was meant to refine you, to burn away emotional dependency and replace it with inner authority. In isolation, your instincts became sharper, your boundaries clearer, and your intuition louder. Now that refinement is visible, you move differently, you choose differently, and people can feel it without you saying a word. Point 6. Why you must not return to old rooms. Hear this clearly, and let it settle deep within you. Do not return to rooms God removed you from, because removal was not rejection. It was protection. There are exits in life that are holy, even when they feel lonely. When God leads you out, it is not to punish you, but to preserve what He is developing within you. Going back to spaces that required you to shrink, perform, or tolerate disrespect would only place your spirit back into confusion. You did not imagine the discomfort. You did not misread the signs. God revealed the truth of those environments without you having to beg for clarity, and that revelation was a mercy. Do not explain your growth to people who benefited from your silence. Growth does not need permission, validation, or applause. When you begin to evolve, those who were comfortable with the old version of you will suddenly demand explanations, not because they seek understanding, but because your change disrupts their access. You are not required to translate your healing into language they can accept. Some people only feel respect after embarrassment forces it upon them, and anyone who needs to see you suffer before they honor you was never safe to begin with. Respect that comes late, and only after loss, is not respect. It is regret. Do not soften your boundaries to make others comfortable. Boundaries are not walls of bitterness, they are gates of wisdom. Distance is not hatred. Distance is discernment. Distance is what happens when you finally listen to what your spirit has been trying to tell you for years. You're allowed to step back without explaining why. You're allowed to protect your peace without providing footnotes. When God removes you from certain dynamics, He is teaching you what you are no longer available for. Silence brought clarity, where noise kept you confused. In the quiet, you saw patterns instead of excuses. In the distance, you recognized manipulation where you once saw familiarity. That separation was not emptiness, it was instruction. Distance preserved you when proximity was draining you. Honor that. Honor the version of you that survived without applause, that healed without witnesses, and that obeyed God even when it meant walking away alone. Do not go back. The lesson has already been given, and your future depends on your willingness to remember it. Point 7. Your authority is now felt without words. You didn't win by overpowering anyone. You won by staying aligned. That is why your presence feels heavier now. That is why people choose their words carefully around you. That is why conversations change when you're near. You carry authority without announcement. You don't need validation. And insecure people feel that deeply. This was not revenge. This was balance. God restored order. Remain humble. Remain distant. Remain protected. If this message aligned with your spirit, comment, "I am chosen." You are never alone. You are being positioned. Having said this, watch what happens next.